As Russia's athletes arrive to jeers at the Rio Olympics, it's reported the entire Paralympic team will be banned over allegations of state-sponsored doping. Good evening. The International Olympic Committee passed the buck a fortnight ago when it refused to ban the entire Russian team. But it seems Paralympic officials are made of sterner stuff. It's being reported that tomorrow all the country's Paralympic athletes could be told not to bother turning up in Rio next month. Just this week, Russia warned such a blanket ban would be a mass execution of innocent Paralympians. Also tonight...
No justice! No justice! Kill Mark Duggan!
5 years after police shot dead Mark Duggan, triggering riots across the country, protesters march in his memory. They warn the racial tensions which led to violence then are still as raw now. A fire in a bar in the French city of Rouen kills 13 people at a birthday party. It's believed candles on a cake were the cause. And
Piers Sellers, this is his third space flight.
The British-born astronaut Piers Sellers tells us why, after being diagnosed with terminal cancer, he's ditched the bucket list and is working harder than ever as a climate change scientist before time runs out for him and the planet.
These are big changes, and certainly within sort of the lifetime of people around now and future generations, they're sort of irreversible.
So, according to newspaper reports, all Russian athletes could find themselves banned from the Paralympic Games next month, with an official statement due in Rio tomorrow. It means the sport's governing body, the International Paralympic Committee, would be taking the decision which Olympics chiefs backed away from by excluding the entire Russian team over the country's systemic doping. Our sports reporter Jordan Jarrett Bryan has this.
Russian Federation.
This was the Russian team making their grand entrance to the Rio Olympics last night.
Not much to talk about, move along now.
But the damning verdict of systematic state-sponsored doping means their Paralympic counterparts are unlikely to be making the same walk. Tomorrow's Observer will claim the International Paralympic Committee is set to take the decision most of the sporting world were expecting the IOC to take and ban the Russians from the Games. It's only been weeks since Professor Richard McLaren's report revealed the extent of doping. It found the Russian Sports Ministry directed, controlled and oversaw the manipulation of samples, including 35 positive samples taken from Paralympic sports that disappeared. All claims the Russians have repeatedly denied. Cue widespread calls for a blanket ban of all Russians at the Olympics, but instead the IOC passed the buck back to the individual federations.
Yes, I can.
We're only 32 days away from the start of the Paralympic Games, but for the Russians, it might now be...
No, you can't.
Well, Jordan's in the studio with me now. Jordan, tell us a little bit more about what you've learned tonight.
Well, first of all, these reports are not confirmed, but I've spoken to somebody at the International Paralympic Committee, and they didn't confirm nor deny the speculation that the Russian team will be banned from the Paralympic Games. These are unconfirmed reports, I must again reiterate, but due to these the reports of systemic state-sponsored doping within the Russian Federation, the International Paralympic Committee are saying that they may feel it's best to ban the whole team from these games.
And if that were to happen, what would the implications for the Paralympics be, do you think?
Well, they'd be huge for two reasons. First of all, because the Russians are big players within the Paralympics. They always feature heavily in the top 3, top 4 of the medal set at the Paralympic Games. That opens it up to other nations to win other medals. But secondly, it's significant because if the International Paralympic Committee do ban them from the Paralympics, it may make other sporting bodies kind of wake up and think, well, hang on a minute, if the IPC are doing this, we need to look at whether we want Russians featured in international sporting tournaments. I'm thinking more FIFA, where Russia are hosting the World Cup in 2 years.
And no official comment from the Russian team
Not as of yet,
tonight.
no.
Jordan, thanks very much. Now, a man who attacked police officers with a machete in the southern Belgian city of Charleroi has been shot dead by officers at the scene. The man, who's reported to have shouted Allahu Akbar as he launched the assault outside the city's main police station, injured 2 female officers. Belgium's Prime Minister condemned the attack, while the Interior Minister described it as cowardly. French investigators are trying to work out what caused a fire which swept through a bar in the northern city of Rouen, leaving 13 people dead and 6 others injured. It's thought the blaze broke out when a birthday cake fell onto the floor, setting fire to the carpet and filling the room with toxic fumes. Tim Bouvry reports.
Smashed glass and charred bar stools. The relics of a birthday party which ended in tragedy. It's thought that the fire began in the basement of the Cuba Libre bar when a birthday cake, decorated with candles and sparklers, fell to the floor and set the carpet ablaze.
There was panic in the bar. Everybody was trying to get out. But well, unfortunately, those who were downstairs didn't have the time to get up. In my opinion, those who were downstairs didn't burn, but were asphyxiated, due mostly to the smoke, I think.
I told my friend, let's get a spot on the terrace. I was about to sit down when, all of a sudden, everything blew. We saw the smoke, we saw the flames, the chairs flew out the window. We got scared and stepped away.
The fire was swift and ferocious, but it was the poisonous black smoke from the burning polyester ceiling which police say was responsible for the 13 dead and 6 seriously injured. Today, friends of the victims, who were mainly between 18 and 25, spoke of their loss.
I got here when it blew up, when it all went up. I was trying to meet my girlfriend to see if she was okay, to see my friends. We've now lost our friends. It's sad, very sad. It's not easy because it still hasn't sunk in. We're still in shock.
More than 50 firefighters responded quickly to what has become France's most deadly fire for 11 years. The country has been on high alert following a summer of atrocities, the latest of which, the murder of priest Jacques Hamel, occurred less than 6 miles away. Terrorism was swiftly ruled out, but this was no comfort for the friends and family of the victims. And once again, France is grieving.
Tim Bouvry reporting there. 2 rebel groups in Syria say they've broken the month-long siege of Aleppo for the first time after days of fierce fighting. Around 300,000 civilians have been trapped in eastern parts of the city, surrounded by troops loyal to the Assad regime. Opposition activists claim they've managed to open up a route into the city, controlling a key road through the southwest. But observers say there's still no secure corridor between rebel-held territories. And Syrian rebels have seized control of a key town which has been held by so-called Islamic State fighters for more than 2 years. A group of US-backed rebels, including the Kurdish YPG militia, have been battling to take back Manbij for weeks. Some 70,000 civilians were trapped there by the heavy fighting. It's at the centre of key supply routes between ISIS-controlled areas in Aleppo province. Now, hundreds of activists from the Black Lives Matter group have marched through North London with the family of Mark Duggan, whose shooting by police sparked riots in 2011. The demonstration was held to commemorate the 5th anniversary of his killing and to demand justice for others who've died in controversial circumstances. From Tottenham, Jane Death reports.
Who are the murderers? Who are the murderers?
On this day in 2011, Mark Duggan's family walked to Tottenham Police Station. 2 days before, police had shot him twice. In the days that followed his death, later found to be lawful by an inquest jury, first London, then other cities descended into riots. Tottenham remembers every year, but this year the growing Black Lives Matter campaign, born out of anger at policing in America, is reflected here. Later there'll be a screening of a film about Mark Duggan's death, The Hard Stop.
My views towards the police again was always I hated them.
The ones that think they can use their power to intimidate you just because they've got that uniform, and do you know what? They don't intimidate me.
Starring his best friends. Marcus Knox Hook says 5 years on, things are no better in Tottenham. How has this area changed in the 5 years? Is the policing better? Is the opportunities better or not?
No, I mean, there's a big regentrification going on. You've got new flats that's being built up. I mean, it's not to benefit the local community.
Police admitted they got things wrong before and during the riots. Mark Duggan's family say people on the estate where he grew up still don't trust the police and are still not trusted by the police.
This community has been persecuted by the police ever since.
And that hasn't changed, even with Mark's death?
Well, look how heavily cameraed it is. These cameras are on 24 hours a day, and the police are watching this community going about their daily lives. Why? All I can see is the British police are moving more towards the American-style policing methods.
The riots were sparked by anger about Mark Duggan's death, but also, according to an official report, over a lack of support and opportunity for young people from forgotten families. What do you make about the arrival of the Black Lives Matter campaign in the UK? Do you think we need it?
I do. We need more of it, because we matter.
Until there's justice, there's no peace, then we need Black Lives Matter.
Bryn Phillips was given community service for joining in the riots in 2011. Today he's a community organiser working with young people who, he says, still feel dispossessed.
We have to accept this is not about consumerism. The riots were caused by a lack of personal responsibility. That's absolutely true. It wasn't the only factor. Inequality and a lack of power and opportunity were also contributory factors, and those problems still persist.
The policing today was light touch and relaxed. But no one here wants violence, especially Mark Duggan's family. They want a respectful vigil.
Well, Barbara Toomey is a London-based activist and a member of the NUS Black Students Campaign. She was on the march this afternoon and joins me now from Tottenham. Barbara, clearly no riots there, but is there a sense of anger not far below the surface?
Yeah, a lot of people are angry because, you know, as the cats have impacted people's lives over the past 5 years in which, you know, Mark Duggan also died, you know, things haven't got better for a lot of young people. They don't feel like they have a lot of opportunities. So I think that people do genuinely feel upset. I mean, with the tripling of tuition fees, maintenance grants being taken away, I feel like a lot of young people here will feel like there's nothing out there for them. And that obviously makes them angry. But I think a lot of people are also channeling that anger into activism, into saying that we want better, holding our elected representatives to account, and getting involved in their local community.
See, there have been quite a few reports that there are new homes, new jobs in the area. Would you say that the inequalities are less pronounced than they were 5 years ago?
I think the Conservative government's austerity agenda probably doesn't help a situation here in Tottenham where, you know, local communities funding are being taken away, opportunities for young people are being taken away. I think that really the riots 5 years ago was a chance for us to see that if you take everything away from local people, this is what happens to them. They feel like they have nowhere to call home. They feel like they have nothing to contribute to that community. And I think that we must continue to say that the cuts, you know, exacerbate problems here in Tottenham, and we must say that we don't want any cuts to public services.
So you wouldn't be surprised yourself to see more riots of the kind that took place 5 years ago?
I don't want to see any riots actually at all. I think loads of people, you know, it sparked a situation which couldn't be held. Nobody could foresee that. And I think people here today, I mean, I'm involved in the Black Lives Matter movement. I see loads of young people coming together. Loads of people are angry, including myself, but we're channeling our anger into community activism. We're channeling our anger into holding our elected representatives to account. We're channeling our anger into raising consciousness about the way the black people are treated in this country. And I think that that's what a lot of young people want to do.
Well, you're also channeling your anger in that movement into drawing attention to police violence. Do you think there is an issue there that when you look at America, for example, where a vast number of black men and women have been killed by the police, here that's not the same? Do you accept there is a difference?
Kathy, one black person being killed by the police is an issue. If one person can be killed, it escalates into two, it escalates into three. Thousands of people have died in police custody, yet, you know, the police have a duty of care to us. If I'm arrested, the police have a duty of care. I need to be able to go to a police station and come out alive. And for a lot of black people, that doesn't happen to them. So even if it's just one person that dies in police custody, that is a problem. And obviously this struggle is global. Racism is not a problem, or institutional racism is not a problem unique to the United States or America. It's an international, it's a national problem, it's an international structure, and we're linking up with those struggles, the Black Lives Matter movement in the US and Black Lives Matter in the UK. We can actually begin to address, you know, the institutional structure, international way that racism affects black people's lives across the world.
Barbara Toomey, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you. Well, the Rio Olympics are now well underway after a colourful opening ceremony in the city's Maracana Stadium. Andy Murray carried the flag for Team GB, but some of the biggest cheers were reserved for the Olympic refugee team. More on today's sporting events in a moment, but first, it was a night for Brazil to showcase its history and culture, despite an economy mired in deep recession. It was an impressive spectacle, especially when you consider the challenges the host country faces: political turmoil, economic crisis and the Zika virus. Rio de Janeiro did its best to forget its troubles and give 3 billion people watching across the globe a night to remember. From the very first signs of life on Earth to the arrival of the first Portuguese explorers who founded modern Brazil. The show celebrated the country's history and controversies, paying tribute to the contribution made by African slaves and Japanese immigrants. From ancient to modern, supermodel Giselle turned the Maracana Stadium into her final catwalk. Strutting their stuff, the athletes, Andy Murray leading Team GB out. But amongst the loudest applause was for a team of refugees. And the country's most famous son, Pelé, was kept away by poor health. So it fell to Vanderlei de Lima to light the Olympic cauldron and officially begin the 31st Olympiad. Well, let's take a look at some of the sporting action today. And less than 2 weeks after winning his third Tour de France title, Great Britain's Chris Froome is aiming to win Olympic gold in the men's cycling road race. Froome is now approaching the final stages of the marathon 6-hour race in Rio. After a bike change, he remains at the head of the peloton behind Great Britain teammate Geraint Thomas. Earlier, Brazilian police carried out a controlled explosion on a suspect package close to the finish line. The United States have won the first gold medal of the Games with a shock victory in the women's 10-metre air rifle event. Ginny Thrasher beat her Chinese rival and former Olympic champion Do Lee to win her first major international title. The 19-year-old scored an Olympic record 208 to win gold, putting her country top of the medals table. Great Britain's women have made a winning start in the first Olympic Rugby Sevens tournament. Simon Middleton's team scored 5 tries to beat hosts Brazil by 29 points to 3 in Rio. Great Britain will play Japan in their second Pool C game at 9 o'clock tonight. Great Britain's most successful Olympic women's rower Katherine Grainger and her teammate Vicky Thornley have reached the semi-finals of the double sculls. Grainger and Thornley finished second behind Lithuania in their heat today to qualify for the next stage of the event. Grainger, who's 40, is aiming to defend her title after winning gold in London 4 years ago. England's cricketers have built a commanding lead over Pakistan on day 4 of the third test at Edgbaston. Joe Root, Johnny Bairstow and Moeen Ali all scored half-centuries as Alistair Cook's team took their second innings lead past 300. The 4-match series is currently level at 1-1 with 1 match left to play. Football, and Rangers returned to the Scottish Premiership after 4 years with a 1-1 draw against Hamilton. In today's other matches, there were wins for Motherwell, Partick Thistle and Dundee. Reigning champions Celtic begin their title defence against Hearts tomorrow. Now, he's a former astronaut and leading NASA scientist. But when Piers Sellers was diagnosed with terminal cancer, he asked himself, was continuing to study the effect of climate change really worth the bother? As he started drawing up his bucket list, though, Dr. Sellers realised that spending his last days climbing Everest or lying on a secluded beach wasn't actually the stuff dreams are made of. Instead, he went straight back to the office. Our Washington correspondent Kylie Morris has been speaking to him.
Piers Sellers. This is his third space flight.
It may have been his third journey into space, but it clearly never felt like just another day.
If you're feeling kind of heroic here, you've got all your gear on, holding your helmet and stuff. And go out to the pad, huge pad, big shuttle standing there, some steam and stuff coming off it.
10, 9, 8.
And before you know it, hatch closes, and then you hear this immense roar behind you as the main engines start. Bam, bam. And then the bolts release, and boom, off you go. And it's like somebody letting off a small bomb under your backside. I mean, you're being pushed up by some giant hand really fast. Launch tower goes whoosh, like that. Watch the Mach numbers go by. Times the speed of sound, 80, Mach 20. Now, Mach 25, 8 minutes into flight, boom, engine cuts out, and you go from being crushed into your seat under 3G to 0G in an instant, and everything's suddenly floating around the cabin. And you look out the window and you realize, ooh, I made it to space. This is really something, and it is as beautiful as they say.
Piers was born and grew up in the East Sussex countryside.
Was Yuri Gagarin, the first to orbit the Earth.
He was 6 when he saw Yuri Gagarin spinning in space.
The day after my birthday, so I thought it was all done for me. I was really flattered by the whole thing, and I sort of barely understood this, how the world was round and somebody could fly around it.
Apollo 8 Houston, over.
There's more profound inspiration to follow. The Apollo 8 mission brings home images that change forever the way we see ourselves and our planet.
But really seeing it, you know, a little blue round thing hanging in black space, that's an eye-opener. That's real.
After university studies at Edinburgh and Leeds, Piers Sellers eventually leaves for the US in 1982 to work at NASA in an obscure branch of science, modelling climate systems. By the time his bosses tell Congress it's possible human activity is changing the world's atmosphere,
Okay, the hatch is locked up.
he's seeing that for himself from outer space.
Today's spacewalk continuing now as Piers Sellers.
He goes
and Mike
walking
Foster.
in space 6 times.
And there you are, kind of standing up, gliding above the world. It's literally unearthly.
Astronaut Piers Sellers now in view from...
Later on, you know, during the business of spacewalking, there were quite a few periods where you get a chance to look around and it would sink in that you are flying around this huge, beautiful planet, and it's curved in both directions.
Looks like a country down there. Beautiful, sun shining off the river. Just gorgeous.
Black sky, big blue planet, little tiny clouds all dotted around. It's very, very real, and it brings home to you just where you are and what you're doing.
Is there a sense of fragility looking back on the Earth?
When you look to the horizon, there's a big curve of the Earth, and there's this tiny thin film of atmosphere. And you look at that and you say, wow, you know, no surprise that we can affect this very thin layer so significantly with our activities. There isn't much of it. It's just a dusting of gas around the planet.
In terms of climate science, is there a moment where you saw a particular measurement and it made your heart race because you thought, actually, this is almost getting beyond our reach?
We've seen a gradual decline in the Arctic sea ice. So sometime in the second half of this century, most likely there'll be an ice-free Arctic Ocean in the late summer. You know, hasn't been one like that for an awful long time on this planet. Same with the Greenland ice mass, we're losing ice at a ferocious rate. You know, it's just melting and dropping off into the Atlantic. These are big changes, and certainly within sort of the lifetime of you know, people around now and future generations, they're sort of irreversible. We're not going to get the ice mass back on Greenland anytime soon. It's going to take centuries.
Time is of the essence, not only globally, but also for this British-born pioneer of space and science. Fighting pancreatic cancer, he has no energy to waste on those who would deny what he's lived his life proving. There are people on the Science and Technology Committee on Capitol Hill who don't believe in climate change.
Supposedly, yeah.
Supposedly. Well, that's the thing. Do you feel as though there's still work to be done to persuade people?
When it comes to deniers, who I think are in the business of creating confusion and doubt in the public and thereby delaying change, you know, I'd say to them and their representatives the same thing I'd say to anybody else. You know, the facts don't support your case. The atmosphere is warming, the ice is melting, the sea is rising. You know, we've observed all these things from space and on the surface. They're facts. The scientific debate is done. You know, we know what's going on.
Given your current situation and your illness, for you, is there an added sense of urgency?
This urgency drives my urgency. You know, given sort of finite time left, you know, what's the best way to spend my energies? Trying to get the message out that we have to get on with this sooner rather than later, because the 2 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial level target, you know, that we're aiming for is probably manageable within the resources of our global civilization. And you'll find a lot of people who think that a 3-degree world is not. The stresses would become so great that there would be, you know, conflict over very basic resources.
Here's a view from Piers's helmet, kind of looking
that
back.
That 6-year-old boy who was watching the man spinning around in space, I'd imagine would look at your achievements and the world that you've seen in your career with a sense of absolute wonder.
Disbelief, I think. No, I've had the luck. I've had the luck to live in, I think, the most exciting 60 years in the history of the world. Since World War II, the pace of technical evolution and of exploration has just been staggering. It's been exciting just to be alive, right?
A reminder of tonight's main news. The Observer newspaper has reported that all Russian athletes could be banned from the Paralympic Games next month, with an official statement due in Rio tomorrow. The International Paralympic Committee could take the decision which Olympics chiefs backed away from by excluding the entire Russian team over the country's systemic doping. We're back tomorrow at 10 to 6. Until then, that's Channel 4 News. Very good evening.